Welcome back to this episode of Growth Island. Today we're going to learn about migraine and headache, something I have been looking very much forward to learning more about and finding an expert. There's so much advice out there, but it's hard to figure out what's up and down and what's really true. So I went digging for someone that has really done some research. And I'm pretty proud because today I got Steven Silberstein on. He's a medical doctor. He's a professor of neurology and the director of the Jefferson Headache Center at Thomas Jefferson University. He has served the American Headache Society as president, treasurer, and board of directors. And I can continue on for a long time. He's also been involved in more than 300 publications. This is a guy that knows something about headache. It's not someone that just wrote a fancy article with a lot of beautiful pictures, but someone that's really been looking at the research. So Steven, thank you so much for coming on.
You're more than welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Steven, what is migraine? Because a lot of people are saying like, I have migraine or I have a headache and so on. But what is migraine really?
Let's just start with a headache. A headache is really a pain in the head. So for example, if the pain goes to the lower part of your head into your neck, you call it neck pain. So one, it's pain in the head. And migraine is characterized by some differences from just a mild tension headache. One, it has to be moderate or severe. It has to be at times throbbing. If you get up and move, it gets worse. And often it's on one side of the head. But in addition, patients frequently have sensitivity to light, sound, odor, nausea, and or vomiting. So it's more than just a headache. It's a headache plus.
Got it. And so I've been diagnosed with migraine. I was a teenager, 14 the first time. Suddenly I had blurry vision. I thought it was very weird because I had never had blurry vision before I was playing sports. So I just thought it was kind of weird. I kept playing and it didn't hurt in my head. And then suddenly like the most severe headache that I ever had in my life hit. And then later I was throwing up. And this happened several times. And then my doctor was like, this is a migraine. But why do we get it?
Why do we get migraine?
Yeah.
Well, one can ask that question two ways. One, why did evolution, if you believe in evolution, allow migraine to persist? And then two, what does it mean? And some people have suspected that people with migraine, their brains are more sensitive. So if you were a caveman and you had the ability to sense an animal or something dangerous near you, it leads to survival. Also, it's odd. We actually did a survey at the American Academy of Neurology. People attending a headache course, whether it was choice or not, we found about 80% of the people, mainly men, had migraine. So we either say that migraine makes you a neurologist or being a neurologist gives you a headache, one way. And we don't know why people have migraine. It's familiar. If you have a parent with migraine, the odds are you will get migraine. If you have twins, good idea. The idea is that twins may have it too. We know with certain rare types of migraine, there's a gene for it. But in the garden variety migraine, we know that there's genes that lead to it. We don't have a real good answer yet. We're looking.
Yeah. It's interesting. So I started learning more about what triggered migraine. So lack of sleep and a lot of physical exercise. Then I'm much more like, and then light. There's a specific disco light in the club. Whenever that gets turned on, I close my eyes. Or like when you have a camera, this is one of the worst things. I feel oversensitive, but my vision starts getting blurry. And if I don't really like close my eyes, do deep breathing or something else, it suddenly triggers that.
Well, what you need to know is migraine's more than the headache. People can have symptoms other than headache before the migraine attack and afterwards. Common symptoms include, before the headache starts, sensitivity to light, blurry vision. Some people get an aura where they think things moving. Some people can't talk. Some people get pins and needles in their arms and their legs. And then after it's over, it's like after you're getting drunk, you have a hangover. You're not sharp. You get brain fog. And these are the things that can all occur with a migraine attack.
Yeah. Some people have it chronically almost, and some people have it more like it's coming once in a while. At least that's what I heard. Is that true, or like what's the case?
Okay. The average person has 1 or 2 migraine attacks per month, but there are many people who have 4 or more attacks per month. Those are the people that need prevention. And there are also a percentage of people who have migraine, they have it almost every day. And that's called chronic migraine. And these people are never entirely headache free, or most 1 or 2 days a month. And in the last 10 years, we've come to realize that chronic migraine is part of migraine. And now we have drugs that specifically are targeted to chronic migraine and to people, and for both chronic and what we call episodic migraine. They're the same. Difference is chronic migraine means you have headaches more than 15 days a month, and episodic means less than 15. It's arbitrary, but it's a good way of looking at the problem and the disability.
Got it. Is it, if you have it more chronically, is it the same intent? I know like the intensity of migraine is different. I went to school with a guy that went to the hospital several times. I never went to the hospital for migraine, but he actually got hospitalized for the migraine. But I'm thinking if someone have that 15 days in a month, it's very hard to function.
You're absolutely correct, but there's a difference. There are many patients who, once they're treated, they have a little bit of a headache every day, but it's trivial, and maybe once or twice a month, bad headache. And there are other patients who have bad headaches almost every day and cannot function. And as that you heard, a friend of yours went into the hospital. We have a hospital, the purpose of which is to break the headache cycle, so that the patients can then start having less frequent headaches and function better.
Okay. So what do we know there's something genetic. I know from personal experience, but that's not research-based, that lack of sleep, not getting enough food, water, a lot of hard physical activity. I got, when I was a teenager or younger, I got most of my migraine attacks at sports, actually. When we had these tournaments where we would play 3 to 4 games a day over several days and little sleep on an air mattress, I would often get those migraine attacks there. So what do we know about what triggers migraine?
Okay. What we mean by a trigger is something that happens and then it's followed up by a migraine attack. But let me tell you what's not triggers. Chocolate. People used to believe that, and the study was actually done in England, where they gave chocolate or something different, and there was no difference. My personal belief is there are things that occur before a migraine attack, and what the desire to eat chocolate says, you eat chocolate, you won't get the attack. And these are things that actually protect us. And we've worked with a company that created a diary. Many of the so-called triggers are really protection. So, for example, if you feel fatigued, you're tired, and you sleep, you kill your headache. So the fatigue may be protected, but there are clear, as you think, things that can bring on a migraine attack. Not eating or hypoglycemia, dehydration, exercise can induce some migraine attack. These are things that are clear that can do it. Alcohol, we've actually done studies of that. It can actually induce some migraine headache. So there are a number of things that really are triggers, but the mythology that's grown around triggers, particularly for chocolate. So I tell everybody, half curiously, half kiddingly, that best treatment for migraine is to eat a bar of chocolate.
Well, Stephen,
that's what I do. I have migraine.
This was worth the entire interview. I love dark chocolate, and I heard that myth. It was actually one of my questions, whether that was actually true or not. So that's good to know. I had a longer period. I was trying to track what it happened. Like, I luckily don't get migraine that often any longer. I can feel if my body's getting too tired. I take very much care of my sleep and so on, because I know that makes a big difference. At least that's what I feel. I've got it down to like once, twice a year, sometimes every second year. And I used to have migraine attacks once a week, but I took a longer period without chocolate, and then I still got it. Yeah. So I was like, okay, it didn't seem like it was connected, that I got less migraine attacks by not eating chocolate. So that's good to know. So all of the migraine chocolate lovers out there now have an excuse to.
But there are food triggers. For example, MSG, which is in Chinese food. If you don't tell not to put in it, can trigger migraine. So there are MSG, monosodium glutamate, which is the spice they put in Chinese food.
Yeah.
And if you look at the labels of things, the MSG in it, the flavoring, that can trigger migraine. It's not that there are no triggers, but a lot of the things we believe are triggers are probably not triggered.
So what are the known triggers, and what are some of the triggers that we thought that are not really triggers, like chocolate?
Best triggers, as you've already pointed out, is you start to exercise, that can induce migraine. If you don't get adequate sleep, if you don't eat, and dehydration, and MSG, other things will give you a migraine. You go to the theater, dark, sunny day, you come out, you see the light, that light can actually trigger a migraine.
Yeah. Neck tensions. I found like in my right neck that it can go up and give a lot of tensions. And if that's really, really tense, it seems to be more likely to come. Is that something that makes sense?
That it does absolutely make sense, because we tend to look at this as independent of the headache. Many people with migraine have neck tenderness. And simple way of looking at it, the nerves from the neck and the nerves from the head all go to the same place. So if these start to get sore, they make the rest of the head more sensitive. So neck pain is very common with migraine. In fact, botulinum toxin or Botox, which we use to prevent chronic migraine, we often inject the neck muscles where it's tender. So I think you need to not separate the neck from the head. You need to realize that if your neck is tender and hurting, take care of it, stretch, do some exercises, ice it. These are things that can be done.
Yeah. What's the biological thing that happens in the brain, and what do we know, like, in regards to migraine?
Okay. Very simple answer. You know what hives are, right?
Hives?
You get these little hives, nerves release things, and you get the breakout and itches on your skin. Okay. A simple way of looking of migraine is hives of the lining of the brain. What really happens is the nerves get excited. They release chemicals. Those chemicals go to the pain fibers, and the pain fibers give you the migraine. And the fact that the brain has blood vessels, the pulsating, comes from the blood vessels around these areas. And there's like a neurogenic, that's the term, inflammation from the nerves, neurogenic inflammation. So the simplest way to look at migraine is hives, the lining of the brain.
Got it.
And the chemicals that are released, like CGRP, is important because there are now drugs that go against CGRP, prevent you from getting a migraine headache.
That's fantastic. So let's dive into some of the stuff that works. So what are things we can do to kind of prevent migraine, or like once we get it, to recover as fast as possible?
One, if it's bright out, go to either put a shades over your eyes, avoid light, avoid loud noises, and rest. Important. Number two, if you know you're going to have a migraine attack, have something with you to take. The longer you wait to treat, the more difficult it is to treat. So, for example, you start with simple over-the-counter analgesics, and you can go from that to drugs like the triptans. Sumatriptan, every country has a different name for it. With DHE, there's new drugs called GPAT. So there's a lot of different drugs. One of the things you should find out is what works for you, and have it available so you can take it as soon as you feel it coming off. The caveat being, if you have very frequent headache, the very drugs that treat it can make your headache more frequent. So therefore, if you have occasional headaches, do that. There are also devices now. So for example, many people don't like to take medicine because they get a side effect. And we have devices. We have a little unit that goes here. We have something that stimulates the back of the brain. We have something that stimulates the vagus nerve. We have a patch that goes on the arm. All of these are called neuromodulation, and all of these are safe and effective with treatment of migraine. So, for example, you may want to put the patch on in the morning, and then if you get a headache, you push a button on your phone and it's activated. Or you may want to take the vagal nerve stimulator. You keep it in your pocket, take it, put it on a minute and a half, and it's effective if you don't want to take drugs so therefore there are non-drug alternatives. Biofeedback, relaxation. People can go into a trance. They learn these techniques of meditation that can help control migraine.
So even over, if I can just jump, what are those patches called? That you can put different places?
The Thoracic and makes patch. Nerivio is the name of the patch. They're an Israeli company. This is a TENS unit that comes from Belgium. The vagal nerve stimulator comes from the United States. And so these are just three examples of devices that can be used to help control migraine without drugs.
And what's the name of those? I'm pretty sure some listeners would love to look them up.
Sure. This is eNeuro, electrocore. eNeuro, this is the device. And the company got a mental block.
Yep.
But this is a little TENS unit. They're definitely. PFALY, the name of the device.
Fantastic. And these are all devices where there have been studies done, where they tested on subjects or...
They've all had, in order to get approval in the United States, they have to have a clinical trial to show they're effective and safe. So in order to get approval and the indication for migraine, there have to be studies, and they're all published in peer-reviewed journals.
That's fantastic. So many people are suffering, and there's so much advice out there about stuff that works that don't really work. Whereas, like, what are the things that are actually good studies being done on, both medicine-wise? Like, some of my podcast people think I'm critical to medicine, but I'm a huge fan of medicine. I just think it needs to be used correct. Like, I'm so grateful for all of the pharma companies that has produced these amazing medicine that can really help us. But I'm also very curious to some of those solutions that don't have side effects. Yeah. So I think it's like, I'm from Denmark, is a pharma country, and it's absolutely wonderful stuff we built, but we just need to know like when to use it and when to potentially use something else, right?
Yeah. I don't believe you can only use drugs, only use devices, or you can only use meditation. You need to know what works for you. In fact, we've created a website where we have reviewed materials, and we actually believe that everything, to our knowledge, that everything on there is evidence-based. And the thing talks about diet, certain types of nutrition, talks about appropriate exercise. It talks about meditation skills. It talks about the right kind of exercise. And one of the things that people need to be aware of, many of the supplements like vitamins and minerals that people take for headache, there's evidence they work, but people never know what they're getting unless they're certified. So when somebody did a study, I think it was the New York Times, they went into a pharmacy in New York and they got a whole selection of the over-the-counter vitamins, minerals, and supplements. And they found that often what they said was in the label wasn't there. And some, in fact, are contaminant.
Yeah.
So one of the things we did in partnership is to create a resource for safe nutraceuticals. And I think that's very important. Or if you can't get them, at least be sure that some independent agency looked at it and analyzed.
But it's a huge problem with supplements.
Yes.
I know it's like, it's nice that it's not regulated because it puts a lot of us cost, but it's also horrible because so many people are putting crap into the supplements. I've been told, like, from industry experts, like a lot of fish oil, that around 80% of it is crap. Like, it's only the placebo.
That's exactly correct.
But with those 20% that are good, those are good for you. But that's also why you have studies showing that fish oil is not efficient. But that's, of course, if you like are taking crap. So you need to ensure that the source that you're getting is really high quality. Yeah. Otherwise, you're not going to get the benefit.
Yeah. And it will stay on the label, independently analyzed.
Yeah.
And that way you know that. So for our nutraceuticals or supplements, company makes it and then we send it to the outside lab to be sure it's pure and there's no contaminants. So that's really important.
The website you mentioned where you gathered all of the resources, what's that called?
Control M Health.
Okay, perfect. .com?
No, don't. What I just do, Google it, Control M Health, and then it'll take you to there and you'll be able to see everything. In fact, there's an app. You can put it on your phone and do all that kind of stuff.
Fantastic. What are some of the other natural things that we can do to try and prevent migraine or deal better once we get migraine?
Well, something you said that exercise can bring on your headache. Now, what I have learned is the following. Exercise is not bad for you, but how you do it. So, for example, moderation. If you want to exercise, you know it produces headache. You don't go from 0 to 100 miles an hour. You warm up, you give your body a chance to move, and you do that. And not only that will keep you from getting a headache, but it'll prevent you from getting future headaches. That's one thing about exercise. Sleep, most important thing. Something I need to tell you. How does the brain get rid of all its waste? every part of the body makes waste products. How do they get out of the brain? During sleep, channels open up called the lymphatic system and stuff drains out. If you don't sleep adequately, the lymphatic system doesn't open. And basically speaking, it's like your brain is stuffed up with all this garbage, and that can produce headache. You got to get adequate sleep. Not uncommon among people today is sleep apnea. There are people, and the way you find out about it is you don't wake up refreshed in the morning, or your bed partner tells you you're snoring all night, you keep waking up. If that is the case, you can get a sleep test, something like a breathing device. And that can make all the difference in the world. We've seen a lot of people coming to our clinic who have headaches. They're tired. They don't sleep. You talk to their wife or their husband, whatever it is. They go, yeah, he's up all night snoring. The first thing I'll do for somebody like that is get a sleep test. And I've got more people better by having them sleep right than probably anything else quickly. But that sleep's good. Sleep, exercise, fiber, diet, and nutrition. Fasting causes headache. There are some religions have fasting days, and I guarantee many people get a headache on that. So if you're in a place where you know you may not be able to eat, keep a protein bar with you. It's the best thing you can do to prevent a headache coming on. And those are simple-minded things. Relaxation.
If we just jump into something first, Stephen, sorry. I think all of them are super fascinating, and I would like to go deeper. So if we start with supplements, what are some of the supplements that are useful?
Sure. Magnesium.
How much magnesium and what form of magnesium should you take?
Magnesium fumarate. Because here's the problem. If people have constipation, certain forms like milk of magnesia contains a form of magnesium that doesn't get absorbed. It goes in your stomach, it comes out your backside, and it gives you diarrhea. So magnesium fumarate is the one that gets absorbed.
What about magnesium malate?
Malate is good too. I would say fumarate and malate. Those are the two best, but give the fumarate the best.
And is it because of the absorption of the magnesium that fluoride is better?
Basically speaking, it has to do with the fact that fumarate and malate are better absorbed as magnesium compared to other forms of magnesium. And the less they're absorbed, the more likely they are to give you diarrhea.
Yeah. How high of a dose would you take? And would you do it on a daily basis? So I personally take magnesium malate every single day. I do it, I don't remember the doses, but I do it an hour before bed or half an hour before bed.
Yeah. The idea is you take a supplement, take it on a regular basis. The other thing that's been shown recently to be effective is vitamin D as a drug. And if you don't get enough sunshine, vitamin D, you don't get enough sunshine, that's a supplement that can also help you with it. Another supplement is riboflavin, another vitamin. And that taking that, all the things I'm talking about, there have been controlled trials proving they're effective. So if you have riboflavin, also is effective, vitamin D, particularly if you're somebody who's taking a statin, that's a drug to reduce your cholesterol. If you take vitamin D in addition to that, it may be better than either alone. Then there's things called Edicides, Betterber. So there are a number of supplements. And the ones we've actually talked about on our website is ones for which there's good scientific evidence.
Fantastic. Do you have the links on the website as well to those?
If anybody is interested, they can just search me on Google.
Yeah.
And just anything they're interested in. Or we have written guidelines for the American Academy of Neurology. And in those guidelines, and if you send me an email, I'll send them to you. And you can distribute anybody who wants it. And the guidelines look at all the studies and show what's the best evidence for each of them and the scientific data on which they're based. I spent a lot of my career creating evidence-based guidelines for that in migraine prevention. So I'd be more than happy to provide that to you, and just send me an email and I can make it available on your website or whatever you need it. And that really tells you where a bunch of people get together to look at all the evidence and they say, based on this evidence, this is really going to work, or there's very little evidence.
Yeah.
That's helpful to people.
It's super helpful, and it's very time consuming to that work yourself. And it can be very hard to figure out like what studies are high quality and so on. That's why it's fantastic when someone has done all of that work. And you can find saying like someone that has the knowledge like you, has been working with research for so many years, can actually see like this is a good study or this is a bad study, and this is what you should start with testing out on yourself and figure out what works for you.
That's my suggestion. Find something that you know works and make sure the bottle says something and it's in there. Make sure it's independent.
You mentioned fasting can be a problem. And so when I started doing intermittent fasting, which is just these 16 hours, I remember I felt very like pressured and almost like, oh, I would risk getting a migraine. And I slowly built up the tolerance. So now I often fast those 16, 20 hours and I feel perfectly fine. But in the start, I often ended up eating because I feel like, hey, this might be a migraine developing if I don't get some food now. What's the reason for that?
As you just said, you need to build up tolerance. Just like with exercise, you don't go from 0 to 100. So we all fast overnight.
Yeah.
Most people fast from the time they get to bed till they get up. So people are fasting 8, 10, 12 hours a day already. So what you do is you say, well, normally maybe you have a bit snack at 8 or 9 o'clock. So you eliminate that. So you have dinner at 6, and then you go to 6 a.m. That's 12 hours. Take advantage of sleep. And that'll become part of your fasting. And what you do is you extend it to either side of before you go to bed and you wake up. And that's one way of fasting without getting in trouble.
Yeah. What's
hard is when you don't fast, you stop eating the night before, and then you spend the next day not eating. That's when you get migraine.
Yeah. So I've considered doing a several day fasting. Many of my friends are doing it, and many health experts are advising like once a quarter, every half a year, like 3 to 5 day fasting. But I haven't done that yet. What would you recommend? Because I have a history of migraine, then I test it out. But if I'm starting to feel like this could develop into a migraine, I cut the fast and start eating. Or push
That's
through
exactly
and hope
what
for the
I
best.
suggest.
Okay.
Yeah. I would suggest that listen to your body.
Yeah.
If you're starting to fast and you get a headache coming on, eat. But what you'll find is just like you have, if you do it slowly and extend it, you'll be able to fast more with less side effect.
Yeah.
So it's like everything else in life, moderation.
Makes sense. I also have the feeling that if I have to do this longer fast, I will need to not exercise a lot. I know some people exercise really well fasting, but that's my personal feeling, I haven't tested it yet, is that combination will push my body to where migraine starts. If I'm exercising and not getting the proper food, then that's a trigger, I imagine. But I don't have any data on that. I haven't tried it, but that's...
Yeah. It turns out that when you start to fast, your liver gives you sugars. For long fasting, the fat breaks down, which is a source of energy. So your diet, independent of your diet, what your muscles and your body is living on, changes sugars to fats. And after a while, you can become tolerant of that. But if you don't become tolerant of it, you just have to get into it slowly.
Yeah. So basically, I have some podcasts as well where I talk to people about burning fat instead of carbs and getting into ketosis and so on, and the body slowly gets used to that. And that it takes around 3 weeks to get the body more used to burning fat and getting used to intermittent fasting where you no longer have this craving in the morning.
That's exactly what happened. In fact, ketonic diets are used for epilepsy and in some cases migraine. But this is not a function of fasting. It's a function of taking food substances that are digested and become ketones as opposed to sugars.
Got it. There's one lady, I haven't interviewed her yet. She also has a PhD and I think it's from Switzerland. And she talks very much about a ketogenic approach to dealing with migraine.
Yeah, like I said, there's good evidence for epilepsy and there's some evidence that it works for migraine.
Yeah.
And some of the drugs we use, for example, actually tend to make you a little ketonic or acidotic. And it may work that way. So I'm not saying not to do it, but what I'm saying is there is no evidence that it's bad for you, and there's some evidence suggesting it might be good for you. But it takes a lot of determination to do that. And many people are not willing to go in and do slowly. Keep on it.
Yeah. What are some other things that are possible to do to, again, avoid, or once you get it? You talked a bit about meditation.
Meditation, to the best of my knowledge, is a way of concentrating and focusing your brain and taking control of things. And in the process of doing that, you take control of your pain pathways. Now, that sounds silly. It's not. I'll give you an example. You ever stub your toe and then you massage your leg and the pain goes away? There are systems in the brain that go from the brain downward to turn pain off. If you're a soldier and you get wounded in the battlefield, you know you have to get the heck out of here. You'll feel no pain. Because if you feel pain, you'll die from being shot again. So the body has the ability to turn pain off, pain modulation. So we can do it through meditation. The patch on the arm does called pain modulation. Your brain can do it. So we have the ability to turn our pain off if we train it. The other thing we have learned recently is that not all light is bad. There's a certain frequency of blue-green light that actually helps people with headache. And there's a company named LA which makes a lamp developed by a friend of mine, Dr. Rami Burstein, is a neuroscientist at Harvard. And they actually showed that people who have this light in a room, they don't get as many headaches and they can work. You sitting in front of your computer with bright lights on, get one of these lamps. And I think you can get them on Amazon or the website or whatever. But it's something new, and it's scientifically proven that a certain frequency of light will make, not only won't give you a headache, but might make your headaches better.
That's fascinating. I had several episodes on photobiomodulation, and it is so interesting how different light spectrums have an impact on our body, and how
it is.
We've looked into it for many years, but it hasn't become more mainstream. It seems like, at least in the biohacking circles and like the tech circles, that the red light and photobiomodulation is winning more and more attention. And I've also seen how we are looking at neurodegenerative diseases, and there's like early results on Parkinson, dementia, and so on with different light spectra. It's absolutely fascinating.
You're absolutely correct. And the studies of the green light were originally done in animals, and they put an inflamed surface of the brain, and they put electrodes in the pain centers in the brain. And they showed, depending on the frequency of light, you get more activity or less activity. And they did the same with the patients. They could actually look at the response to the light, what they called electroretinograms, and showed that the colored lights make a difference. You're absolutely correct. The frequency of light, the amount of light, really makes a difference.
Yep. It's going to be interesting to see the next 10 years with more funding going into it, how we're going to get this new understanding and better understanding of light. Also, how we're learning now how the blue light in the evening is kind of hurting our health, our sleep, and many other things. They're like these red light blockers. I have a pair. I don't use them that often. I don't feel the big difference from it. Wearing these red glasses in the evening, so before going to bed, but many people swear to them, and it's like one of the game changers for many people is getting these glasses on in the evening so they get better sleep.
The problem with glasses for migraine is they're not developed yet adequately, specifically give you the frequency that relieves headache. It's not that glasses aren't a great idea. There is a company now that's developing glasses that will do that, but it's far from real life yet. But I think that if you were a person, you have a night light in your room, if you have this blue-green light, it soothes your brain down, you'll sleep, it may help prevent headaches. It's been proven to be effective scientifically.
What are other things that science has shown is good for migraine?
Something very interesting. You were talking about tension in your neck, right? If you feel that, you could put heat and cooling on it, and the combination of the heat of cooling will actually turn those nerves off and prevent you from getting a bad headache. So one of the suggestions I would make is if you feel that, you can put up some cream that'll cool you down. And if cooling works, cool it. If not, warming it. And that will affect the ability of the nerves to transmit pain. And that may prevent you from getting a bad migraine.
So that makes sense intuitively to my experience. I often have an intuitive feeling or need after a while for a really cold shower and then warm shower. And for some weird reason, my body asks for the mix. So that would speak to
100%. But let me tell you the science. This is brand new, something we're working on now. If you take a nerve and you heat it up, it'll stop conducting. You cool it down, it'll stop conducting. But those are extremes. But if you alternate cool with warm, you can actually block conducting of the nerve from pain without damaging the nerve. And that's what you learned in the shower. And there's a company now that's developed a device that alternates heating and cooling. You put it where it hurts, and it can take migraine away. I'm getting ready to go into clinical trials of a device that does exactly what you do in the shower, alternating warm and cold. You're ahead of the game.
Fantastic. But it's funny how our body pushes us to something intuitively that we're then figuring out that we can do in another way as well.
Yeah.
What's the name of that company? I would love to look them up as well.
Thermicball. It's Thermicball. Okay, again, when I send you the other stuff, I'll send you information on the device. Basically what it does, it's a little box, heats it up, and after a period of time, it cools it down, heats it up, cools it down. And their new device should be available in about 2 or 3 months. But it's fascinating how the basic science of nerve conduction can be applied to us to make us feel better.
Yeah. Yeah, science is fantastic. And it's fantastic how it can help us to live better lives. That's why I love getting people on the podcast, both in the research, but also people that are working on some of these new technologies where they, for example, photobiomodulation, figured something out and saw like, okay, there's actually fairly good studies. Why haven't this been promoted yet? And then they make a device, and often people are very skeptical when someone is selling something. But I found that most of the people that are selling this stuff, a lot of them come from personal pain and looked for a solution, and then was like, okay, why hasn't anyone done something about this? Let's turn this into technology.
And I've been involved with designing clinical trials to show that the device that are something that looks like it's called a sham device.
Yeah.
And you need to do that because how do you know it's just a doctor telling you it's going to work, you believe it works, it'll work, as opposed to really showing this is adding something. That's important.
Yeah. What are some other innovations that you've seen that so currently been validated? And then I would love to hear about some of the stuff that you don't have the validation for yet, but that you think there might be promising early results.
Okay.
What you think will,
There is one company that's working on a device you put in your nose to cool it. And the idea is you work on that. There's another company that's working for a device you put in your ear and vibrates. And by vibrating, you actually signal the nerves and it turns the pain off. So that's 2 different devices that are currently under development. Another thing I mentioned earlier, those these glasses, and what they are, when you look at a computer screen, it doesn't have good resolution. You see the pixels?
Yeah.
This is basically like a computer screen. It tends to pixelate what you see. In the process of doing that, if you're motion sickness, you can drive in a car, and also the right frequency color to make you headaches. It's still in development, but I tried the device myself, and I used to get car sick as a kid. Which, by the way, if you get car sick as a kid, there's a pretty good chance you're going to get migraine later. But it's good for car sickness, and it also, when it's available, be good for controlling headache.
Interesting. I think it's a Danish company. I don't remember the name right now, but a friend sent it to me. They made some kind of device with like breathing into.
Oh, yeah.
That had good
breathing device. Yeah. It's a company in, I forget it was Norway or Denmark.
I think it was Danish.
Denmark. Yeah, Denmark. And actually, I met them and talked to them about it. I actually tried the device. Now, the original work came a long time ago that people noticed when you had a migraine aura If you breathe the tank of oxygen and CO2, that would turn the aura off and prevent you from getting a headache. This is a rebreathing device. It's like a bag, but you keep breathing your same air. And what it does, it builds up the carbon dioxide and has the same effect of breathing a tank of 95% oxygen, 5% CO2. There are studies, it works, it's not yet available in the United States, but it takes advantage of a very old observation that can't carry a tank with you, but you carry this device with you. And it's not yet, it's getting ready to go into clinical trials in the United States.
I love those kind of things, like where people figure that out and like, okay, how can we make this more simple? It's like, actually, we can just make like this breathing bag. Do you remember the name of it? I remember something like Rehaler or something else.
It's a breathing Rehaler. I don't know what their marketed name is, but when you send me the email,
yeah,
I'll dig it out.
Fantastic.
The name of the company. It's in Denmark.
Yeah, I followed them for a while, waiting for it to be released, and I'm a bit curious.
It's now available.
Yeah,
it's now available outside the United States, to the best of my knowledge, and now they're getting ready to bring it to market in the United States. What I like about it, it fits in your pocket. Yeah. It's like blowing up a balloon. You breathe in and out. And none of these things work for everybody. But if you find something that works for you, that's all that matters.
Yes. But it's really wonderful to speak to someone like you who is not in those companies. It can sometimes be because when someone starts a company, they fell in love, many of them fall in love, that's the proper word, with the technology or the idea. And there's also vested interest. But it's nice to know with someone that actually does the research and looking into the stuff, saying like, hey, the research coming from here is solid, but we still need to get it fully validated. So this is where we are in the development stage, right? So I often say in the podcast as well, it's like, I love Western science. It's double-blinded studies, and we know this works for the majority of people, but we got to be aware N equals 1. Like you might be the outlier. I also love ancestral wisdom. I just want to make sure that when we talk about it, that we don't speak about it like it's something that's been tested and approved, right? Because there's many ancestral things, such as meditation used to be something we thought was crazy, but turned out to work really well. Fasting, we know now as well, is good for many things. So there's a lot of this ancestral wisdom that is useful. We just need to speak about it as this is anecdotal evidence or something people have been doing for thousands of years, but we're not sure whether, like, we haven't proven that it works. And I think it's important to have the dialogue.
Look at aspirin.
Yeah.
Look at aspirin. It's derived from the tree. And people, there's a picture in Japan, there's a temple that people went to dedicated to headache. And in that temple is a tree from which aspirin is. So people survived before scientists knew anything. And I think the two basic premises are most important. Is it safe? If it's safe, then you don't have to worry about taking it. And it may or may not work for you. Even with the proven device, nothing works 100%. Therefore, don't give up. I think we shouldn't think of migraine as one disease. We should think of migraine as a bunch of diseases. And let me give you a good example. There's a variety of migraine that runs in families that produces attacks with paralysis of the arms and legs on one side, called hemiplegic migraine. We now know there are 4 different gene mutations, genes are a piece of the DNA, 4 different genes that can produce the same disease. So we have 4 diseases which produce hemiplegic migraine. We don't know yet what causes migraine genetically. Probably a bunch of genes work together, but the question you need to face is your migraine and my migraine may look alike, but there certainly may not be alike. And what works for you may not work for me, and vice versa.
I think that is very important to stress. I was told, and I'm curious about, that with your hand, there's like here over your thumb, this place you can press a pressure point that's supposed to be good, and up around your temple.
Oh, okay. Okay. Condition, pain, modulation. If you let somebody stick you with a needle or something.
Yeah.
You can quantitative how much pressure you need to make a pain. You then dump your hand in ice water and do it again. Your capacity to withstand pain increases. It's called condition pain modulation. And basically, the ice water tells the brain to send signals down to turn pain off. So when you do that, it's the same thing. That's the principle of the patch. It stimulates some of the nerves, goes to the brain, turns the pain off. Same in the battlefield. The body can turn pain off. And we can use techniques like that, ice water, or other things, because what the brain is interpreting, this pain is really driving me crazy. It's really bad. Turn it off. In the process of turning that off, you're turning your other pain.
Got it. Time is running. Stephen, there's so many things I want to ask you, and it's so fascinating to finally have found someone that has been doing so much research on a subject that I've been curious about for many years. One of the last questions. So I found that the mental part is really important as well. If I think at least that I learned when I got older, that I could, like my mental mindset, really believing that I'm not getting migraine kind of almost helps, where if I'm like, believe, okay, now I'm getting a migraine attack, then it would evolve. And it would be so like when I'm talking to people, I really just want to get awake, be somewhere warm, or not warm, dark, and just close my eyes, do deep breathing and tell myself, this is nothing.
Okay.
Where if I tell someone, this is like, I'm getting migraine, please leave me alone, then I feel like then 100% it's become migraine.
You just talked about deep breathing.
Yeah.
When you take deep breaths, that activates the vagal nerve. Whether you stimulate it there or take deep breathing, we know deep breathing turns pain off. So there are animal experiments where they actually show deep breathing or stimulate the vagus nerve, you turn pain off. So for example, if you have pain in your stomach or anywhere in your body, take deep breaths, activates the vagus nerve, turns the pain off.
So that's part of helping.
So that's part, meditation, deep breathing, all that.
What did I not ask you about that I should have asked you about in this talk so far?
How did I get interested in migraine?
Yeah. How did you get that? I'm guessing you had it, and that's the way with the pain or someone that was close to you.
Well, I had migraine. My mother had it, but I never knew what I had, and they never talked about it in medical school. I started out as a general neurologist, and one of the physical therapists whose offices was down the hall from me once a week would have a migraine attack, and the whole thing fell apart. And then I decided I'm going to find somebody who knows something about migraine. There really wasn't anybody back then, 40-some years ago. But I learned about migraine. The second thing was that my wife was working for a company, and she couldn't find anybody to speak on migraine. So she said, you're going to do it for me. Those two factors got me interested in migraine. The rest is history.
Fantastic. It's incredible what the loved ones can...
Yeah, they can make you do a lot of things, good and bad, right?
Yeah. Stephen, where can people find out more about you?
I'm at the Jefferson Headache Center at Thomas Jefferson University. We have a website, and you just Google my name, Stephen with PH Silberstein. I've wrote tons of things about migraine. We even did a book for patients with the American Academy of Neurology. So we have a patient care book. We have lots of things. So, and that would be a good way for somebody who's not a specialist in the field to learn more about the basic tricks of handling migraine. The American Academy of Neurology publishes these books on neurologic disorders. One's on migraine headache, and I do. One of my colleagues, William.
Got it. I'll make sure to link to all of this stuff as well. I'll send you the email.
Okay. And Control M Headache has a lot of the stuff we've got, Dr. Young and I, are putting a lot of materials online.
Yeah. Another final question, Stephen. Like, you've seen different things in your life. You've done a lot of research. So apart from migraine, like if you had to give someone like 3 advice on living a good life.
I believe in wellness. And the fundamentals of wellness are eat appropriately, exercise, get sleep, and have mutual respect for your friends and neighbors. And have somebody you can really talk to in heart to heart and not worrying about the fact they're going to stab you in the back. You need somebody like that in your life. Whether it's your wife or your boyfriend or this or that, that's the best thing to keep you going. Somebody to talk to.
Fantastic. I really appreciate it, Stephen. Thank you again so much for coming on. I think this is going to be one of my favorite advice or like favorite episodes with all these concrete things to do with migraine. I'm going to check out all of these different companies because getting migraine just sucks. It's that short. Whatever you can find.
Yeah. Send me the email. I'll give you all the information.
I will do. Again, thank you so much for being on.
And thank you for having me.